He wasn't supposed to be there. Not on that trail, not that day. But fate doesn't ask for permission. A child no one was looking for. A scream swallowed by the swamp. And a predator with eyes older than time. No one heard. No one came. Except a dog, a retired K9 named Shadow, and a young officer still haunted by his own ghosts. What Shadow did next defied nature, training, and every instinct of fear. It wasn't just a rescue. It was a revelation. Of courage, of loyalty, and the sacred bond between man, beast, and a child nearly lost to the dark. What happened in the heart of the Louisiana swamp will move you to tears and restore your belief in the unbreakable. Before we begin, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell so you won't miss any of our true stories that honor the silent heroes among us. The morning mist hung low over the Atchafalaya Basin like a heavy, grieving veil. Cypress trees stood still as sentinels, their roots clawing through the dark water, and the air smelled of wet moss and ancient decay. In the distance, the low growl of an airboat faded into silence, swallowed by the swamp's breath. It was early October in southern Louisiana, humid, overcast, and eerily quiet. The kind of morning where even birds chose silence over song. Officer Ryan Carter steered his patrol boat slowly through a narrow canal bordered by thick reeds and gnarled trees. At 29, Ryan carried himself with a quiet resilience. Tall and lean, with short dark blonde hair and storm-gray eyes, he had the kind of presence that didn't demand attention, but commanded it nonetheless. A thin scar traced his jawline, reminder of a bar fight he'd broken up in Denver years ago. He rarely talked about his past, but it followed him like a second shadow. Since transferring to St. Martin Parish 4 months ago, he had spent most mornings like this, navigating the labyrinth of bayous and backwaters, ensuring no campers went missing, no hunters strayed too far, and no predators, human or otherwise, crossed into places they shouldn't. But today felt different. The air carried a tension that his instincts didn't trust. Sitting beside him on the deck was Shadow, a German shepherd canine with a coat of dark sable and eyes that seemed too knowing for a dog. Shadow was 6 years old, broad-shouldered and silent. He had once served in a narcotics unit in New Mexico until an explosion during a warehouse raid left his handler in a coma. Since then, he had struggled with overstimulation, refusing to re-enter crowded areas, yet excelling in wilderness patrol. Ryan, who had requested a transfer after the drowning of his younger brother Eli, found a strange kinship in the K9's withdrawn loyalty. The two had quickly formed a bond rooted in shared silence. Ryan slowed the boat near a narrow bank where tall reeds brushed against the hull. He cut the engine, letting the boat drift into the silt. He pulled out a compact notebook, weather-worn, leather-bound, and scribbled a few lines with a fountain pen. "Eli, the cypress groves here look like something from our old stories. I almost hear your voice in the wind this morning." He paused. Shadow perked his ears. A rustle. Not the splash of a heron or the slide of a turtle, something heavier, a pattern of movement not belonging to any animal Ryan was used to seeing this deep. Ryan stood slowly and scanned the bank. "Shadow," he said softly. The dog rose, muscles taut, nose lifted. They moved cautiously toward a faint trail carved between ferns and roots. Ryan crouched near the mud and examined the ground. Amid raccoon tracks and flattened brush, a distinct impression stood out. A small, barefoot footprint, no more than the size of his palm. "Kid's been through here," he muttered, frowning. Shadow sniffed the print, then the air. He gave a low whine, unusual for him. Ryan followed the dog's gaze up a tree just ahead. There, mounted with camouflage tape on a crooked trunk, was one of the department's motion-triggered game cameras. Ryan reached into his vest for the handheld monitor, syncing to the camera's feed. Most shots were of possums and fog. Then, at 02:19 a.m., the screen flickered with something else. A blurred image of a small child, maybe 7 or 8, walking unsteadily along the embankment. No shoes, thin shirt, alone. Ryan's grip on the monitor tightened. He rewound and played again. The boy was real. No adult in sight. The image disappeared into the haze, swallowed by the swamp. Shadow, track. Without hesitation, Shadow led them off the trail, deeper into the cypress maze. Ryan followed, mind racing. There had been no reports of missing children, no Amber Alerts in the last week. The nearest home was a mile north, a rundown cabin where an elderly widow named Helen Bro lived. He made a mental note to check in with her later. As they pushed further, the mist thickened. Water sloshed beneath their boots. Spanish moss hung low like mourning veils. The swamp grew quieter. Even the insects seemed to pause. Ryan tapped his radio. "Dispatch, this is Unit 9. I need a welfare check request opened. Possible minor in the Atchafalaya Preserve, Eastern Quarter. No ID yet. Will update." The radio crackled, then silence. The trees swallowed all signals here. He exhaled slowly and looked down at Shadow. The dog stood still, nose twitching toward the east, body frozen in focus. Something wasn't right, but they weren't turning back. Not until they found that boy. The swamp changed when you weren't watching. One moment it was still, peaceful even. The next, it breathed differently, more deliberate, more ancient. The path ahead was no path at all, just shallow water winding between ghostly cypress knees and clusters of duckweed. The air was thicker now, not just with humidity, but with a tension that clung to the skin. Shadow moved ahead in low, measured steps, his nose close to the water's surface. Ryan followed silently, hand resting near his sidearm but not drawing it. His boots sank softly into the marsh as he navigated the same trail the dog carved ahead. He didn't need to ask if Shadow had picked up something. The K9’s posture had shifted from searching to alert, and his body moved like a drawn bow. Then Shadow stopped. A low growl, almost imperceptible, vibrated in his throat. Ryan stepped closer, squinting toward the tangle of roots where Shadow was fixated, and then he saw it. A dark smear on the root of a cypress tree. Just above the waterline. Blood. Not fresh, but not old either. It had dripped and dried unevenly, as if from something that had paused here before dragging itself, or something else, away. Ryan crouched and examined the bark. Human? Animal? Too little to tell. But Shadow was restless now, pacing a few steps ahead, turning back, then forward again. Ryan stood and whispered, "Track." Shadow obeyed, and they moved deeper into the swamp. 5 minutes later, they came upon the bank of the river, a sloping, silty edge just wide enough for a boat to dock. Something had disturbed the shoreline. Massive slide marks in the mud and water pooled unnaturally where vegetation had been recently crushed. A smell hit Ryan like a wall, pungent, reptilian, and foul. "Alligator," he muttered. "A big one." It had been here recently. Too recently. And judging by the length of the drag marks, it was at least 10 feet long, maybe more. The presence of blood meant it had likely fed, or tried to. Shadow sniffed toward a patch of flattened grass and gave a sharp bark. Ryan moved to inspect, finding more droplets of blood in a crescent pattern. Small, as if something had struggled or stumbled, and among them, a tiny plastic bead from a child's bracelet, green and shaped like a heart. His jaw tightened. He scanned the area. No footprints, no sign of a body. But the trail ran parallel to the river, further into the interior. Not a good place for a child to wander, especially with a gator this size nearby. Ryan stood and exhaled through his nose. This wasn't just a welfare check anymore. He tapped his radio. "Unit 9 to dispatch. Found fresh predator activity, signs of blood, possible child-related. Requesting aerial sweep from drone unit if available." The radio crackled back. "Copy that, Unit 9. No drone units available until 1400. Weather fronts moving in. Proceed with caution." Weather, of course. The wind had shifted, barely, but enough that Ryan felt a chill creep beneath his collar. The clouds above had thickened into a steel gray. Rain was coming, likely before noon. "Let's check in with Helen," he murmured. She might have heard something. They made their way northeast to the tree line where the marsh began to rise into drier ground. After 20 minutes of trudging through half-drowned roots and swarms of gnats, Ryan spotted the crooked iron gate of the Bro property. The house was older than any map, a crumbling wooden shack propped on stilts, with faded blue shutters and wind chimes made from discarded cutlery. Vines clung to the walls like they were trying to reclaim the wood. Sitting on the front steps was Helen Bro, wrapped in a patchwork shawl, holding a thermos in one hand and a cane in the other. She was at least 80, wiry and sun-worn, with sharp cheekbones and silver hair pulled into a messy braid. Her eyes, pale blue and unblinking, followed Ryan in shadow like a hawk. "Well," she rasped before Ryan could speak, "I figured you'd come." Ryan stopped at the foot of the porch. "Morning, Miss Bro. You heard anything strange last night?" Helen didn't answer right away. She tapped the cane twice on the porch, then motioned him up with the thermos. "Coffee's cold. Company's colder. Come sit." Ryan obeyed, sitting beside her while Shadow laid at his feet. "Last night," she finally said, "I heard a sound like wind crying, but the trees were still. You know what I think it was?" Ryan looked at her, waiting. "A child," she whispered, "crying near the water." His stomach nodded. "Did you report it?" She laughed, not cruelly, but with weariness. "Reported it last month, and the month before. Nobody listens to the crazy old woman in the woods." Ryan nodded. "Where exactly did you hear it from?" Helen pointed with her cane toward the south beyond the tree line. "Near Widow's Bend. Old trail. Not on any tourist maps. The land forgets things faster than people do." He made a mental note of the location. "Why didn't you leave when the parish offered to relocate you last year?" Helen looked out into the trees. "Because no one else hears the swamp like I do. You listen long enough, it tells you secrets. That child out there, he's not the first soul this place has swallowed, but maybe he don't have to be the next." Ryan stood and offered her a soft smile. "Thank you, ma'am. If you hear anything else, radio's always on." Helen grunted and waved him off. As Ryan and Shadow turned to leave, thunder rumbled far off in the distance. The scent of rain was now undeniable. Time was thinning, and out there somewhere between the reeds and the dark waters a child was still missing, and the swamp had awakened. The rain hadn't come yet, but the air felt like a held breath, thick, heavy, expectant. Ryan and Shadow moved cautiously along the soggy trail that bordered Widow's Bend, with the gnarled roots of cypress trees jutting up from the mud like crooked fingers. The wind had shifted east, brushing the reeds in waves, and the swamp had gone unnaturally quiet again. Not even the frogs sang. Shadow walked slightly ahead, ears alert, head low. Ryan trusted the dog's instincts more than any map or procedure. He had served with soldiers who relied on radar and thermal imaging. None of them were ever half as effective as a good dog on a trail. Still, even now, Ryan hesitated. Something about the silence felt staged, as though the swamp itself were listening. They rounded a bend in the trail and came to a patch of higher ground. It was barely more than a mound of firm soil above the flood line, ringed by palmetto and blackberry thickets. And there, half sunk in the mud like a forgotten relic, lay a small bicycle. The frame was red but chipped with rust. The seat was torn, and the rear tire was twisted at an unnatural angle, the rubber shredded down to steel threads. A blue ribbon fluttered from the handlebar, sun-faded but still clinging. Ryan's gut tightened. He stepped forward slowly, scanning the area. Shadow sniffed the air, then darted left, nose to ground. Ryan knelt beside the bike. He brushed away a layer of wet leaves and dirt with his glove, revealing the faint imprint of a child's sneaker tread, no larger than his open hand. It led away from the bike, into the trees, in uneven steps. Another few feet, and the tracks disappeared into moss and mud. He stood and looked after Shadow, who was barking sharply now, not in alarm, but insistence. The dog had followed the trail to a break in the thicket that led into denser woods, where the trees stood closer together and the sun barely touched the floor. "Shadow, hold!" Ryan called, then pulled his radio from his vest. pressed the button, his voice calm but firm. "Dispatch, this is Carter. Found abandoned bike near Widow's Bend. Rear wheel broken. Child-sized footprints head northeast into thick woods. Suspect they belong to the boy seen on trail cam. Beginning deeper pursuit. Over." A beat. Then a familiar voice crackled through, Sergeant Vince Morales, his supervisor back at the parish outpost. Morales was a square-jawed, by-the-book officer in his late 40s, known for his stubbornness and short temper. "Carter, that area's outside the patrol perimeter. Stand down until we can get approval from forestry." Ryan pressed the button again. "With respect, sir, I believe we have an endangered minor on foot near Gator-active wetlands. Waiting could cost lives." "Protocol exists for a reason, Carter," Morales snapped. "We've got teams spread thin this week. Don't make this your personal crusade." Ryan's jaw clenched. "Understood," he said, but his feet were already moving toward the tree line. He clipped the radio back to his belt and muttered, "Then I'll call it a solo assessment." Shadow waited, tail twitching, eyes bright with energy. Ryan gave a low nod. "Go." The dog leapt forward, guiding him into the forest beyond the formal patrol zone. Branches scraped at Ryan's arms as he passed, and the air grew thicker, cooler. The canopy above shut out most light, making even midday feel like twilight. As they followed the trail deeper, Ryan couldn't help thinking about how easily this spot could have been missed. If Shadow hadn't caught the scent, if he hadn't checked the game cam, if Helen hadn't spoken up, the boy might never have been found. Ryan's thoughts drifted. He remembered a meeting 2 weeks ago at the station, where he had proposed expanding the patrol grid to include less mapped areas like Widow's Bend. The region had seen increased gator activity, and the old trail network made it a likely corridor for lost hikers, or worse. But the proposal was denied, deemed too costly and too far outside the priority zone. He could still hear Morales' words. "Stick to what we can see on the map, Carter. The swamp swallows things that were meant to be forgotten." And maybe that was the problem. The map didn't change, but the swamp did. Shadow stopped ahead, nose in the air. A low growl bubbled from his throat. Ryan slowed, unsnapping the clasp on his holster. The underbrush ahead shifted. Not a large movement. Small. Uncoordinated. Then nothing. He whispered, "Is someone there?" No reply. He scanned the branches overhead. No birds. The scent hit him next. Sharp. Musky. Damp with something sour, like old sweat and fear. He stepped forward, crouched low. His hand brushed against something cool, a damp piece of cloth caught on a thorn branch. It was from a child's hoodie, gray with a faded cartoon decal, torn near the sleeve. Shadow whimpered once and looked up at him. Ryan knelt and placed a hand on the dog's shoulder. "He's close," he murmured. He looked back once toward the trail they came from. No path now, just trees. There was no turning back. The sky cracked open with a hollow rumble, and moments later, fat raindrops fell like stones through the trees. It wasn't a gentle Louisiana drizzle. It was the kind of rain that came sudden and hard, filling the swamp with the sharp scent of ozone and turning every trail into a ribbon of mud. Ryan pulled the hood of his jacket tighter over his head as he trudged after Shadow, who, despite the storm, stayed low and focused, tail rigid, ears flicking at every crack of thunder. Shadow's coat, usually a rich sable with black streaks along his back and legs, was soaked and matted, his movements slower now, struggling to hold the scent that had once been so clear. Rain did that. It washed away clues like chalk off a sidewalk. Still, the dog pushed forward with a resolve Ryan had come to trust more than GPS or orders from above. The terrain dipped slightly ahead, and the thick forest opened into a small clearing where a stream cut through the land like a jagged scar. Water from the sudden downpour now surged through it, swift and muddy. Shadow paused at the edge, nose twitching, eyes scanning the opposite bank. He let out a low whine, then looked back at Ryan as if asking for help in decision-making. The trail, whatever had been left, was gone. Ryan crouched beside him. "You lost it?" Shadow didn't move. Ryan ran a hand along the dog's soaked back. "We'll pick it up again. Let's rest for a minute." A few yards off to the right, nestled against the rising roots of a cypress, stood a crumbling wooden shack, half eaten by moss and time. Its roof sagged, but it still offered a sliver of shelter from the rain. Ryan guided Shadow toward it, pushing open the warped door with a grunt. It gave way with a reluctant creak. Inside was darkness, stale air, and the scent of mildew. A broken chair, a rusted oil lamp, old newspapers fused to the floor, but there was space enough to sit. Ryan knelt and checked his pack, pulling out a sealed water pouch and offering it to Shadow, who lapped it gratefully. Then he leaned back against the damp wall and pulled his phone from the inner pocket of his vest. It was scratched, battered, but waterproof, and inside it was a voice he hadn't heard in over a year. He tapped the screen and pulled up an old audio file labeled Eli, 2 weeks before. He hit play. A soft beep, then a boyish voice full of laughter, then fading into something more serious. "Hey, Rye, I know you're probably off saving somebody again. That's your thing. But listen, even if it's one person, just one, it's worth it. You were always the one who ran toward trouble. I ran the other way. Guess that's why you became a cop, and I became, well, me. Anyway, if you ever feel lost, just keep going forward. Somebody out there might need you. That's all that matters. All right, I'll stop before I get sappy." A click. Silence. Ryan swallowed hard, blinking against the sting in his eyes. He had found Eli's body 2 days after he disappeared. Caught between rocks in a cold mountain stream, headphones still tangled in his coat. No foul play. Just a stupid, slippery trail, a bad fall, and the irony that the man who saved strangers couldn't save his own blood. Shadow nudged his leg gently, sensing the shift in his breathing. Ryan offered a faint smile and rubbed behind the dog's ears. "You and me both, huh? Haunted by ghosts." Just then, a gust of wind slammed against the shack and blew the door inward with a bang. Shadow leapt to his feet and barked once, sharply. "Easy," Ryan said, standing. But then he noticed Shadow wasn't reacting to the door. He was staring at something outside, something in the mud near the water. Ryan stepped out slowly into the rain, following Shadow to the edge of the clearing where the stream had swelled. There, half buried in sludge, was a child's doll, its plastic limbs stained, one arm missing, its yarn hair soaked and tangled. Ryan knelt and gently pulled it from the muck. The doll had been torn, likely caught on something or pulled by force. Wrapped around its neck was a strand of fine light brown hair, unmistakably human. Ryan stared at it, heart pounding, the rain now irrelevant. "Kid's close," he whispered. "Has to be." He looked back at Shadow. The dog stood motionless, water dripping from his snout, gaze still locked on the other side of the stream. Ryan tucked the doll carefully into a waterproof pouch and slung his pack back over his shoulder. Then he nodded. "All right, Shadow. Let's finish what we started." They crossed the water together, storm or not. The storm had not eased. Rain hammered the canopy, thudding on leaves and pooling in the earth, turning the forest floor into a thick stew of mud and rotting vegetation. Thunder rolled like distant artillery, each boom a grim reminder of how far removed Ryan and Shadow were from civilization. The stream they had crossed was now a roaring channel behind them. There would be no retreat, not that either of them wanted one. Shadow's ears suddenly snapped forward. In the blur of motion, the dog bolted left off the barely visible path, barking with a force that sliced through the downpour. His voice wasn't one of alarm. It was warning, urgent and sharp. Ryan sprinted after him without hesitation, boots sliding, legs struggling against the weight of soaked earth. They pushed through a thicket of brambles and emerged into a muddy clearing shaped like a shallow basin, ringed by broken reeds and half-drowned roots. And there, in the middle of it, was a boy, no more than 7 years old. His clothes were soaked, clinging to his small frame. Mud streaked his arms and face. His hair, light brown and tangled, stuck to his cheeks. One of his shoes was missing. His hands grasped at roots, trying to pull himself free from the mire that clutched at his legs like cement. He was trapped, and behind him, sliding forward with terrifying grace, was a massive alligator. At least 11 feet long, its mottled green-black scales gleamed in the rain. Its jaws opened slightly, revealing jagged teeth stained with old earth. It moved slowly but purposefully, its long tail swaying with each lurch through the muck. Ryan froze. His legs locked, breath caught. For a moment, time staggered, because he had seen this before. Not here, not now, but in a Colorado mountain creek 2 years ago, when Eli's head went under the rapids and never surfaced. He had stood there too, shocked, paralyzed, his mind screaming move, while his body did nothing. When they found Eli, it was too late, and Ryan had never forgiven himself. The memory slammed into him now, crashing like thunder behind his ribs. He stared at the boy, no more than 15 feet away, struggling, slipping deeper, and for 1 second, a single breath, he was that helpless older brother again. Then Shadow moved. With a growl that shook the clearing, the dog launched forward through the waterlogged mud. His paws barely touched the surface as he charged the alligator, veering to the right, barking furiously to draw its attention. The gator paused, its focus shifting. Shadow circled wide, cutting between the gator and the boy, tail high, barking louder, sharper. The reptile reacted instantly, twisting its massive body and snapping its jaws. Shadow dodged just in time, then lunged again, biting hard into the gator's thick tail. The gator hissed in fury and pivoted with terrifying speed, lunging toward the dog now, and Ryan finally moved. With a shout that tore from his throat like fire, he charged forward, mud flying around him. He pulled his baton from its sheath, extending it with a snap as he ran. The boy had stopped crying, frozen with wide, terrified eyes. "Don't move!" Ryan yelled. He passed Shadow on the right, who had just leapt out of the gator's path again. The gator's jaws snapped inches from the dog's rear leg. Ryan didn't think, just brought the baton down with all his strength on the gator's eye ridge. The impact echoed through his arms. The gator hissed, backing off a half step. Shadow lunged again and bit into its side, snarling with rage. "Get back!" Ryan shouted to the boy. "Now! Crawl!" The boy whimpered and pulled himself toward the edge of the clearing, where roots were thicker. Ryan positioned himself between the gator and both of them, baton raised. The animal hesitated. The blows, the dog's attack, the noise, it wasn't worth the meal anymore. With a low rumble, it turned, tail swinging wide, and slowly retreated into the muddy water. Seconds later, it was gone, swallowed by the swamp. Ryan stood there, panting, soaked and shaking. Shadow returned to his side, tail wagging once, then collapsing to sit in the mud, his flanks rising and falling with heavy breaths. A long scratch bled lightly across his shoulder. Ryan dropped to one knee and scratched the dog's ears. "You're insane," he muttered. "Brave, brilliant, and completely insane." Then he turned to the boy. The child sat under a tree root, hugging his knees, staring at them with dazed confusion. Ryan approached slowly, kneeling before him. "Hey, I'm Officer Ryan Carter. What's your name, buddy?" The boy blinked slowly. His lips were pale, trembling. "Liam," he whispered. "My name is Liam." "You're safe now, Liam. We've got you. That thing's gone." Liam nodded, barely. "Are you hurt?" "My foot." "It hurts," the boy mumbled, pointing to his ankle. It was swollen and muddy, but didn't seem broken. "Okay," Ryan said gently. "We'll get you fixed up. You're incredibly brave, you know that?" The boy didn't answer, just looked over at Shadow. "Is he okay?" Ryan smiled, glancing at the dog, who had laid down and was now licking his own shoulder. "He's tough. He just saved your life." A crack of thunder overhead broke the moment. Ryan looked up. The storm was shifting again. They didn't have much time before night fell, and getting back would be harder. But for now, they had found the boy, and this time Ryan had moved. The rain was easing, though it still tapped against the leaves like a metronome for the swamp's endless hum. Fog had begun to form where the warm earth met the cooler air, casting the clearing in a thin veil of white. Ryan knelt beside Liam, who was now sitting against the base of a tree, his arms wrapped tightly around his knees. The boy was trembling, soaked to the bone, but alive. Shadow stood nearby, breathing heavily. His right shoulder was streaked with mud and blood, a shallow gash from the earlier fight with the alligator. He kept looking toward the edge of the muddy water where the gator had vanished. His tail was low, but not tucked. Alert. Waiting. He wasn't done. Ryan moved to the dog and knelt, checking the wound. "You idiot," he whispered, smiling despite the worry in his eyes. "You're not supposed to be the hero every time." Shadow panted softly, then lowered his head as if in answer. But then came a sound, slosh, low and deliberate, from the shallows. Ryan looked up just in time to see the thick snout of the gator rise again, its scaled head cutting through the water like a prehistoric torpedo. It hadn't retreated. It had circled. "Back!" Ryan shouted, stepping in front of Liam. Shadow didn't wait for an order. He surged forward, his legs slipping in the muck, and lunged toward the approaching threat. But the wet ground betrayed him. His back paw caught in a rut of soft clay, and he slid sideways, hitting the mud hard with a sharp yelp. The gator saw its opening and snapped toward the motionless form. "No!" Ryan sprinted forward, yanking the rescue rope from his pack as he ran. The gator was closing the last few feet, jaws wide and black. Ryan didn't think, just dived, planting his left foot in the muck and twisting the coiled rope around his right arm. At the same moment, Shadow rolled with a sudden snap of movement, a twisting motion under the gator's thrust, not away from it, but under its snout. The maneuver caught the predator off guard. Its massive jaws bit only air and mud as Shadow spun low and used the beast's momentum against it. Ryan seized the chance. He lunged forward, wrapping the rope in one motion across the upper jaw and around the back of the beast's mouth. With a grunt, he yanked it tight and braced his body weight to pull the gator's head sideways, throwing it off balance. The animal thrashed wildly, tail whipping across the water, but Ryan held fast. Shadow, still limping slightly, circled wide and barked repeatedly to keep its attention divided. Finally, the gator twisted one last time, hissed in rage, and then backed off, retreating into the murky current with a slow, bitter slide. Ryan dropped to one knee, breathing hard, soaked in sweat and rain. Shadow limped to him and leaned his body against Ryan's shoulder, tail wagging once, weak but proud. Ryan buried his face in the dog's wet fur. "We're going to need a month off after this." From the base of the tree, Liam spoke, voice small. "Is it gone?" Ryan turned to him. "It's gone, buddy. You're safe." Liam didn't move at first. Then he stood, legs trembling, and slowly approached Shadow. "He saved me." "He sure did," Ryan replied. "Both of us." Liam crouched and gently ran a hand along Shadow's back. The dog looked at him and licked his wrist. Liam smiled, a quiet, ghost-like thing. Ryan exhaled and finally let himself take a breath. "Let's patch that ankle," he said, kneeling beside the boy. As he unzipped his first aid pouch, he asked gently, "Where do you live, Liam?" The boy hesitated. "With my grandma and grandpa, off Cypress Hollow Road." "That's a long way from here," Ryan noted, wrapping Liam's ankle. "What were you doing this far into the woods?" Liam looked down. "I ran away." "Why?" He pulled something from his pocket, a small, worn photo protected by a plastic sandwich bag. A smiling woman with shoulder-length hair stood holding a fishing rod next to a younger Liam. "That's my mom," he said. "She died last year." Ryan nodded slowly, his chest tightening. "She used to bring me to the water when I had nightmares, said the fish would carry them away." Liam paused. "Grandpa and I fought. I wanted to see where she fished one more time." "Widow's Bend?" The boy nodded. Ryan's voice softened. "Your grandpa's probably worried sick. He said I act like a ghost sometimes." Ryan didn't respond for a moment. Then he said quietly, "I lost someone too, my little brother. I know what it feels like, to be angry at the world and not know what to do with it." Liam looked up at him, eyes wet but not from the rain. "You think she's still watching me?" "I do," Ryan said, "especially now." They sat in silence for a moment, the rain easing into a mist. Then Ryan stood and offered his hand. "Let's go home." Liam nodded and took it. By late afternoon, the rain had thinned into a heavy mist, veiling the small gravel road that wound through the pine shadows of Cypress Hollow. Ryan's patrol truck rumbled slowly along, windshield wipers swiping rhythmically, engine humming low. Liam sat in the passenger seat, wrapped in a thick gray blanket from the emergency kit, his muddy clothes bundled on the floor. He clutched the photo of his mother tightly in one hand, eyes distant but calmer now, his breathing steady. Shadow lay across the back seat, head resting on the edge, one paw slightly bandaged from the earlier scrape. His eyes remained half-closed, tail occasionally thumping in quiet contentment every time Liam turned back to look at him. Ryan glanced over at the boy and spoke softly. "Almost home." Liam nodded, but said nothing. They pulled into a modest property tucked behind overgrown hedges and a rusted mailbox. The porch light was already on, an old habit of someone waiting, hoping. An older woman stepped out onto the porch as the truck came to a stop. She was petite but sturdy, with weathered hands and short, snowy white hair. Her cardigan looked hand-knitted and too thin for the damp air, but she didn't seem to notice. Behind her, a tall, wiry man in his 70s stood frozen in the doorway, his expression a cocktail of fear and relief. The woman rushed down the steps as Ryan helped Liam out of the truck. "Oh, baby!" she cried, kneeling and wrapping him in her arms. Liam stiffened for a moment, then melted into her shoulder. The man remained where he was, shoulders tense. His name, as Ryan had seen from earlier records, was Edgar Tramble, a retired fisherman with a stiff back and a reputation for being hard on the outside and harder within. His lined face bore the kind of permanent scowl carved from decades of loss. Ryan stepped up. "Sir, I'm Officer Carter. Your grandson was found near Widow's Bend. We got to him just in time." Edgar's eyes flicked to Liam, and for a heartbeat, something cracked. But all he said was, "He's always run off. Blames me for losing her. But he don't understand what it's like to keep breathing when your own daughter doesn't." Ryan kept his voice calm. "Grief shows up in all kinds of ways. Doesn't mean we stop looking for each other." Edgar grunted and stepped aside so the family could enter the house. Ryan lingered just long enough to see Liam pause at the door and glance back. "Thank you," the boy whispered, then added, "Tell Shadow I said that too." Ryan smiled. He knows. Back at the parish station an hour later, the atmosphere was dry, sterile, and far too quiet. The rain had passed, but the tension hadn't. Ryan sat at a terminal with half a dozen browser tabs open, missing persons reports, patrol logs, local alerts, and none of them mentioned Liam Tramble. Not once. He leaned back in the chair and rubbed his eyes. He had known there were cracks in the system. He just hadn't realized they were gaping. A knock on the metal doorframe pulled his attention. Sergeant Vince Morales stood there, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. His uniform shirt was crisp as always, his salt and pepper hair slicked back, but his jaw was clenched in the way Ryan had learned meant resistance was coming. "You filed an incident report," Morales said. Ryan nodded. "And I flagged the fact that Liam's disappearance never got entered into the database." "His guardians didn't submit it officially," Morales replied. "Dispatch noted they left a message with Wildlife Services, not us. We're not clairvoyant, Carter." Ryan stood. "We're not blind either, sir. That family is isolated, grieving, and living next to a known hazard zone. There should have been a welfare check weeks ago. We've let these gaps grow so wide a child slipped through them and nearly died." Morales' jaw tightened. "You're overstepping." "Maybe," Ryan shot back, "but I'm not wrong." There was a long silence between them. Then Morales sighed, pinched the bridge of his nose, and turned back toward the hallway. "I'll speak to the sheriff." Ryan sat down again, tension still coiled in his spine. He wasn't done, not by a long shot. He drafted a request for a wider audit of local welfare reports, flagged missing entries, and proposed a community outreach protocol. It was bureaucratic work and likely to be ignored, but it was movement, a fight worth taking on. Later that evening, Ryan returned to the edge of the swamp where a narrow footpath curved toward a rickety porch framed in wind chimes and creeping ivy. The house of Helen Bro looked more like a relic than a home, but it was alive with memory. She sat on the porch in her usual chair, a battered thermos steaming beside her. She wore a flannel shirt 2 sizes too big and a wide-brimmed hat that shaded her sharp, lined face. Her eyes were blue-gray, deep-set, and always seemed to know more than they should. Ryan stepped up and leaned on the railing. "Thought I'd check in." Helen didn't look up. "You found him." "I did." "And the dog?" she asked. "He's resting. Took a scratch, but still smug about it." Helen smiled faintly, then finally turned to him. "You ever wonder why that dog doesn't flinch in the face of death?" Ryan sat down across from her. "You mean Shadow?" She nodded. "He wasn't bred for patrols. He was trained by my son." Ryan stilled. "Your son?" "Eli Bro," she said, her voice softer. "Special Forces, Afghanistan. Killed on a night op 3 years ago. They returned his tags and his partner." Ryan blinked. "His partner?" Helen nodded. "Shadow. He served with Eli, trained with him since he was a pup. When Eli died, the unit offered to put Shadow down, said he was too trauma-wired, too unstable. I told them no. I had him transferred to the department. I knew someone would come along who'd understand him." Ryan looked down at the porch floorboards, heart suddenly heavier. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" he asked. Helen took a sip from her thermos. "Didn't seem necessary. Some bonds don't need to be spoken. They just are." The wind stirred the chimes above them. "You both carry ghosts," she added, "and now you've carried someone back." Ryan looked up at the trees. The air felt clearer now, as if the swamp had exhaled. "I think we're just getting started," he said. The morning came quiet and gold-stained, the swamp breathing slowly under a rising mist that curled like ghost smoke above the water. It was the first dry dawn in a week. Sunlight filtered through the cypress boughs, brushing warmth across the damp wooden steps of the ranger station on the edge of Atchafalaya. The world, for once, felt at peace. Ryan stood by the railing, coffee steaming in one hand, Shadow at his feet. The German shepherd had a fresh bandage on his foreleg and a cone collar that he'd attempted to chew off twice before giving up in quiet protest. His ears twitched toward every rustle in the trees, but his body rested, calm and content. Ryan wore a clean uniform today, no mud, no torn seams. His name badge shone faintly in the light. On the table beside him sat an unopened folder with an embossed gold seal. Inside, he already knew, was a commendation letter signed by the sheriff and a copy of a community bravery citation, the kind they gave to officers when they walked into danger and walked back out with someone who wouldn't have made it alone. He hadn't attended the press conference. Morales had tried to push him into it, said the department could use the good PR. Ryan had declined politely and disappeared into the trees with Shadow instead. He didn't need applause. He needed truth and peace. And maybe, just maybe, the slow rebuilding of something that had shattered when Eli died. The sound of tires on gravel broke the stillness. A dented red pickup turned off the main road and creaked to a stop in front of the station. Ryan set his coffee down and straightened as the driver's door opened. Edgar Tramble stepped out, wearing a clean flannel shirt, faded jeans, and boots caked in old paint. The man looked exactly the same, gruff, leathery, but his eyes were different, softer at the corners, less guarded. From the passenger side, Liam hopped out. His hair had been trimmed since the swamp, but his eyes still held the same soft storm. He wore a blue hoodie and held something tight in his hands. They didn't speak immediately. Liam looked up at Ryan, then knelt down slowly in front of Shadow. "Hi, boy," he said. "You remember me?" Shadow perked one ear and tilted his head, then took a careful step forward, pressing his nose to Liam's palm. The boy smiled, then reached into his hoodie pocket and pulled out a thin leather bracelet. It was homemade. simple, braided, with a small silver tag. The tag had been engraved, shakily but clear. Hero. Liam held it out. It's for him. I made it at the center. Grandma said dogs don't wear bracelets, but I told her heroes should. Ryan crouched beside him and took the bracelet carefully. He'll wear it on his collar, right above his badge. Liam nodded, pleased. Edgar cleared his throat. We just wanted to say thank you, both of you. Ryan stood. He's a good kid. Edgar scratched his beard. He's been quieter lately, but not in a sad way, just thoughtful. Started drawing again. The dogs in every one. Ryan chuckled. He's hard to forget. They stood together for a moment longer, watching as Liam sat on the steps beside Shadow and stroked his ears. The boy whispered something Ryan couldn't hear, but Shadow's tail thumped in answer. When they left, Ryan returned inside. The station was empty, save for the faint buzz of the old ceiling fan and the ticking wall clock that had been 5 minutes slow for 3 years. He sat at his desk, pulled the drawer open, and reached for the small leather notebook he kept tucked behind the department's unused citation forms. It was worn and soft, the corners frayed. Inside were dozens of short entries, some scribbled in exhaustion, others in the hush of long nights on patrol, letters never sent, memories never spoken aloud. He flipped to a blank page, uncapped his pen, and began to write. Eli. Today, we saved a life. Maybe it was you whispering through the trees, or maybe it was Shadow hearing what I couldn't. I'm not sure it matters. What matters is the boy gets to grow up, and a family gets a second chance. You'd like him. He's quiet, stubborn, and brave in that way kids sometimes are when they don't yet know what they should be afraid of. And he's got this way of talking to animals like they're old friends. Just like you used to. I still miss you every damn day. But today, it didn't ache the same. It just felt full, like something made sense for a moment. Shadow's sleeping now. His new bracelet says hero. I think it fits. He paused, then wrote one final line. We didn't just rescue a boy. We remembered how to be human. He closed the notebook gently and slid it back into the drawer. Outside, the sun broke fully through the mist, and the swamp, in its strange, quiet way, seemed to hum. Shadow wasn't just a dog who saved a life. He was the bridge between what was lost and what still had a chance to be found. In one stormy stretch of wilderness, he reminded a grieving man how to move again, gave a frightened boy a second chance, and carried the spirit of a fallen soldier forward without a word. Sometimes, it's not grand speeches or medals that change the world. It's quiet courage, a bark in the dark, a heartbeat that doesn't give up. In our busy, noisy lives, may we not forget the quiet heroes, the ones with 4 legs, wet fur, and unwavering hearts. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs hope. Leave a comment. We'd love to hear your thoughts or stories of animals who changed your life. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell so you never miss these true stories of devotion and redemption. And wherever you are tonight, may God bless you and those you love, especially the ones who walk beside you in silence and save you when you least expect it.
The wind howled through the bare trees, rattling against the windows of Olivia's small wooden cabin. Snow swirled through the air in thick, blinding sheets, blanketing the empty road outside. The bitter chill seeped through every crack, a stark contrast to the cozy warmth inside. Olivia sat curled on her couch, a mug of chamomile tea cradled in her hands, watching the flames flicker in the fireplace. The storm had been raging for hours now, and she was grateful she didn't have anywhere to be. There was something strangely peaceful about nights like these, nights where the world outside felt distant, muffled by the snow. She sighed, setting her tea down on the coffee table. It was late. She should head to bed. Then, a noise, a faint scratching, barely audible over the wind. Olivia frowned, sitting up. Probably just a branch scraping against the porch railing. She had meant to trim them before winter, but there it was again, a soft, weak sound, almost a whimper. She hesitated. It could be anything. a raccoon, a stray cat. But something in that sound made her heart clench. A quiet plea, a desperation she couldn't ignore. Pushing herself up, she wrapped her cardigan tighter around her shoulders and made her way to the front door. When she cracked it open, an icy gust of wind hit her, making her gasp. Snowflakes danced wildly in the air, the cold biting at her exposed skin. Then she looked down, and her breath caught in her throat. A Labrador lay collapsed on her doorstep, its golden fur soaked and matted with snow. Its body trembled violently, each shuddering breath labored and weak. For a second, Olivia couldn't move. The dog lifted its head just barely, dull, exhausted eyes meeting hers. Then, as if it had finally reached the end of its strength, it went still. Olivia's heart pounded as she dropped to her knees. The dog wasn't moving. "Oh, no, no, no," she murmured, reaching out with shaking hands. The moment her fingers brushed against its fur, she gasped, ice cold. She didn't think, she just acted. Scooping the limp Labrador into her arms, she struggled to lift its weight, but adrenaline pushed her forward. The wind howled as she staggered back inside, kicking the door shut behind her. She rushed to the fireplace, gently laying the dog down on a thick blanket near the warmth, its body convulsed with violent shivers. "You're okay," Olivia whispered, grabbing another blanket and wrapping it tightly around the trembling form. "You're safe now." The dog let out a faint whimper. Grabbing a dry towel, Olivia began rubbing its fur, trying to get rid of the ice clinging to it. Snow melted under her touch, soaking into the towel, and as she worked, she noticed something strange. The dog's belly was swollen. She froze. Placing a careful hand over its abdomen, she felt a faint fluttering movement. "Oh my God, she's pregnant." A lump formed in Olivia's throat. She had rescued a dog before, but never a mother on the verge of giving birth, and she wasn't just weak, she was in distress. The Labrador let out another soft whimper, her body tensing. Olivia could see it now, subtle, uneven contractions rippling through her sides. Panic tightened in her chest. She grabbed her phone and quickly dialed the nearest vet clinic. It rang twice before a robotic voice answered. "Due to severe weather conditions, our clinic is temporarily closed. If this is an emergency..." Olivia ended the call. Her fingers trembled as she scrolled through her phone, searching for anything. How to help a dog give birth, signs of labor complications, what to do if the mother is too weak to push. Her eyes darted to the Labrador. Her breathing was shallow, her whimpers growing weaker. Olivia's hands clenched into fists. No vet, no help. No time to waste. She took a deep breath, forcing down the fear. "You have to do this, Olivia. She needs you." And so, with nothing but her instincts and the information on her phone, she knelt beside the dying mother-to-be and prepared to save them all. Olivia knelt beside the trembling Labrador, her pulse pounding in her ears. The dog's body shuddered violently as another contraction rippled through her. Her claws scraped weakly against the blanket, her chest rising and falling in uneven, shallow breaths. "You can do this," Olivia whispered, gently stroking her damp fur. "I know you can." But deep down fear clawed at her. The mother-to-be was too weak. Every time a contraction came, she tensed, but the effort seemed to drain what little strength she had left. Her eyes fluttered, barely open, exhaustion weighing her down. She wasn't going to make it through this alone. Olivia gritted her teeth. "Then I won't let her be alone." With shaky hands, she grabbed her phone and scrolled back through the guide she had found earlier. If the mother is too weak to push, gentle abdominal massage can help stimulate labor. She swallowed hard. "Okay, I can do this." Positioning herself beside the dog, she placed her hands on the swollen belly, pressing carefully in rhythmic, circular motion. Seconds passed. Then minutes. Nothing. "Come on, girl," Olivia urged, desperation creeping into her voice. "Your babies need you." As if hearing her plea, another contraction seized the Labrador's body. This time, Olivia saw movement. Something was coming. A surge of adrenaline shot through her. She guided the mother as best as she could, whispering encouragement, praying. Then, finally, a tiny damp body slid into her hands, a single, fragile puppy. Olivia's breath hitched. It's alive, but something was wrong. The mother didn't move. She lay still, chest barely rising and falling, eyes half closed, too exhausted. Olivia's stomach lurched. The pup was still encased in the thin, translucent sack. Normally, the mother would lick it away to free the newborn's airway, to help it breathe. But she wasn't moving. Panic shot through Olivia, but she forced herself to focus. With careful, urgent hands, she tore the sack open, wiping away the fluids, clearing the pup's nose and mouth just like the instructions had said. For one agonizing second, nothing. Then, a tiny, sharp whimper pierced the silence. Olivia let out a shaky laugh, her eyes burning. "You did it," she breathed, cradling the tiny, squirming life in her hands. But it wasn't over yet, because more contractions were coming, and she knew this was only the beginning. Olivia barely had a moment to breathe. The newborn puppy squirmed weakly in her hands, its tiny body slick and trembling, but it was breathing. That was all that mattered. Carefully, she placed it against its mother's belly, hoping the warmth would keep it alive. Then she turned back to the Labrador. The dog's body was still shaking with exhaustion, but the labor, Olivia could see it in the tensing of her muscles, the shallow rise and fall of her chest. "There's more, isn't there?" Olivia whispered, brushing damp fur away from the mother's face. "You have to keep going, sweetheart. Your babies need you." Another contraction racked the Labrador's body, her paws twitching as she whimpered in pain. "You can do this," Olivia urged, her hands pressing gently against the swollen belly. She didn't know if it was the warmth, her voice, or pure willpower, but a moment later another pup slipped into her waiting hands. Then another, and another. One by one, tiny new lives entered the world, their weak cries filling the room. Each time, Olivia worked quickly, breaking the sacks, wiping them down, placing them beside their mother. It felt like an eternity, but at last, the final puppy arrived. Olivia exhaled shakily, brushing her forearm across her damp forehead. Her hands trembled from adrenaline and exhaustion, but when she looked down, a wave of relief swept through her. The Labrador lay motionless, utterly drained, but she was alive. Her chest rose and fell in deep, heavy breaths, and then she moved. Slowly, with the last remnants of her strength, she lifted her head and nudged the nearest puppy, licking it weakly. Olivia's heart clenched. "She knows," she whispered. "She knows they're safe." Tears burned in Olivia's eyes as she watched the mother tend to her newborns, her instincts kicking in despite her exhaustion. The worst was over, or so she thought. As she reached out to gently stroke the Labrador's fur, her fingers brushed against something, a cold metal surface hidden beneath the thick coat. Frowning, Olivia parted the fur, revealing a worn collar buried beneath months of tangled hair, and engraved on it a name. Maggie. A shiver ran down Olivia's spine, but not from the cold. "Who did you belong to, Maggie? And how did you end up here?" A sense of unease mixed with curiosity as Olivia stared at the name, unaware that this discovery would soon unravel a story far greater than she could have ever imagined. Olivia sat at her kitchen table, staring at the name on the worn collar. Maggie. Her fingers traced over the metal plate as a deep unease settled in her chest. This dog had a home once. Someone out there had loved her, and someone somewhere might still be searching for her. Determined, she grabbed her laptop and began searching for any lost dog reports. She entered the name, along with her town and the surrounding areas. After what felt like hours of scrolling, she found it. A post from months ago. Missing, Maggie, a golden Labrador. Last seen near Route 89 after a car accident. She's not just a pet, she's family. Please, if anyone finds her, call... Olivia's breath caught in her throat. The name beneath the message. Daniel Carter. Hands shaking, she grabbed her phone and dialed the number. It rang once. Twice. Then, "Hello?" A man's voice, rough and tired, filled her ear. Olivia swallowed hard. "Hi, is this Daniel Carter?" A pause. Then cautiously, "Yes? Who is this?" Olivia took a deep breath. "I think I have someone who belongs to you." Silence. Then a choked inhale. What do you mean?" His voice was thick with emotion, as if he didn't dare to believe it. "Maggie," Olivia whispered. "She's alive. She made it. And she just had puppies." A sharp breath on the other end. Then a sob. "Oh my God," Daniel whispered. "Oh my God." Thought she was gone. Tears welled in Olivia's eyes. She almost was, but she fought. She fought for them. Daniel didn't hesitate. "Tell me where. I'm coming." The next afternoon, Olivia stood on her porch, arms wrapped around herself as she watched a dark truck pull into her driveway. The doors swung open and a man stepped out, a little unsteady, his eyes red-rimmed as if he hadn't slept. "Maggie?" he called softly, barely above a whisper. Inside, by the fireplace, Maggie lifted her head, her ears twitched, her nose twitched, and then her whole body tensed. For a split second she hesitated, staring at the doorway as if trying to convince herself it was real. Then Daniel called again, this time stronger. "Maggie, girl, it's me." A sharp, desperate whimper tore from her throat, and before Olivia could blink, Maggie was up, legs wobbling, tail thrashing. She ran. Daniel dropped to his knees just as Maggie barreled into him, her paws pressing against his chest, her whole body shaking with frantic, joyful energy. Soft, broken cries escaped her as she licked his face, pressing into him as if she could mold herself back into his arms. Daniel was crying, sobbing, clutching her so tightly it was like he was afraid she'd disappear again. "Oh, girl," he choked. "I thought I lost you. I thought I'd never see you again." Maggie whined, licking the tears off his face, her whole body trembling with happiness. Olivia wiped her own tears away, watching the scene unfold. She had done the right thing. Maggie was finally home. Later, as Daniel knelt beside Maggie's puppies, gently stroking their tiny bodies, he turned to Olivia. "How do I even begin to thank you?" His voice was hoarse. Olivia smiled. "You already have. Just by being here." Daniel exhaled, shaking his head. "I owe you everything, and I want you to have something." Olivia blinked. "What?" He gestured to the tiny puppies curled up beside Maggie. "One of them, if you'd like. Maggie would want that. And so would I." Her breath caught in her throat. She looked at the small golden bundle of fur nestled against its siblings. One of Maggie's babies, a life she had helped bring into the world. Her heart swelled. Reaching out, she gently scooped the little pup into her hands. It stirred, stretching its tiny paws before nuzzling against her chest. A quiet warmth spread through her. For the first time in years, she wasn't alone. She smiled down at the puppy, her voice soft. "Welcome home." 1 year later, the sun was shining as Olivia pulled into Daniel's driveway. The house sat on a beautiful stretch of land, a large yard sprawling out before it, and there, in the grass, Maggie, healthy, happy, playing with her now-grown puppies. As soon as she spotted Olivia, her tail wagged furiously, and she ran over, pressing her head against Olivia's legs in a familiar, affectionate greeting. And right behind her, bounding with excitement, was the puppy Olivia had taken home, no longer tiny, but still just as full of love. Olivia knelt down, wrapping her arms around both of them. This, she realized, was where she was meant to be. Not just a rescuer, not just a bystander, but family. Sometimes fate has a way of bringing lost souls back together. Maggie fought through the cold, through exhaustion, through the impossible, not just for herself, but for the tiny lives depending on her. And in the end, she found her way home. But this story isn't just about survival. It's about love, resilience, and the incredible bond between humans and animals. It's about how one act of kindness, one open door on a freezing night, can change lives forever. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Amazing Paws Stories for more inspiring tales of courage, second chances, and the unbreakable bond between people and their four-legged friends. Because every stray has a story, and sometimes the happiest endings begin with just a little bit of kindness. See you in the next story.